Welcome back to Through a Glass Darkly Radio. You're listening to United Public Radio. The intro music was Mark of the Doomslayer by Karl Casey at White Bat Audio. And again, one of our perennial and favorite guests, Dr. John Brandenburg, is back. Now, just for those who are living under a rock, I'm going to read his bio again so you're aware. But Dr. John Brandenburg is a plasma physicist. He did his graduate work in California at Lawrence Livermore National Lab in controlled plasmas for fusion power, and has worked in defense, energy, and space research. Dr. Brandenburg was also part of the Clementine mission to the moon, which discovered water at the moon's poles. However, the focus of Brandenburg's scientific career has been to complete the great effort of Einstein to unify the two long-range forces of nature, gravity and electromagnetism. Dr. Brandenburg, John, welcome back.
Sean, always a pleasure and honor to be on your show, especially in these holidays when we should, as an act of defiance, be happy, have a cup of cheer, despite all
the question is who's the act of defiance toward, the current regime or the people flying and making the current regime look completely and utterly
You
incompetent and
know,
foolish.
that's a really good question, Sean. Active defiance against who? Uh, I'll give you my own pet interpretation of this whole thing. This bleep show that we're seeing.
Or we could, we're speaking English, but we could say Scheiße. Scheiße show.
Scheiße. This
Yeah,
Scheiße
show's
show.
not German, but it's just a
Hey,
pidgin
I
German.
know.
Yeah, Scheiße show.
That's a Scheiße show. So we're dealing with this Scheiße show, or as the British would say, the great cock up.
Or goat rope. Goat rope works.
What? Goat rope?
Goat rope. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Goat rope. Okay. Well, anyway, this would be hilarious if it wasn't the implications of it were not very serious. We've basically lost control of our own airspace. I mean, if this is supposed to be a government for the people, by the people, of the people, this is not functioning anymore. My own theory, we are seeing a UFO flap, a classic UFO flap, quite intense this time. But then the government, to every action, there's a reaction. The government is doing what the Russians called Maskarovka. Maskarovka. They are creating a whole bunch of sightings of either helicopters or drones or whatever, so that they can just say, and some of the pictures, it's obvious it's a helicopter hovering at high altitude, and they're violating FAA regs because they turn off their lights when anybody tries to get close to them, which is, in a large air traffic area like the Northeast, that could be very dangerous. An airliner could fly right into them. But so they're doing Maskarovka to disguise the fact that this is a UFO flap. And they just arrested, I guess, some people for launching real drones. They finally got some patsies or some, some idiot drone enthusiasts to actually go and try and launch some drones near Logan Airport in Boston. And they got two of them. One of them escaped. I'm sure he won't. And they will do the magnificent perp walk on these people. These guys picked the wrong time to get arrested for doing this. They should have known better. But it also shows the human race is addicted to idiocy. And but anyway, that's my theory, is the core of this, the seed crystal, sort of, at its very core. This is a UFO flap. And then you have the government reaction by doing Maskarovka, flying a bunch of drones around, a bunch of airplanes with big flashing lights, some helicopters that are recognizable, so that this diffuses. The government can say, "Oh, this is all just, people shouldn't get excited about this. This is some kind of exercise." You got people in the military saying, "Well, I think this is some sort of exercise." They don't know. And the FBI and Mayorkas, Homeland Security Secretary, who also claims the southern border is secure. He's telling us we have nothing to worry about.
That guy is the most thoroughly unlikable human being I think I've ever encountered. Have you ever seen him say anything where you're like, this guy is a colossal arrogant prick? Like,
I think he's on some kind of medication, because he always has this kind of amazed kind of look, dilated eyes, and he always looks like he's sort of a deer, has this deer in the headlights look. And but of course, he's carrying out policies that are being dictated by some office in the basement of the White House. Quite frankly, I don't think Joe Biden is actually running the government at this point, and it certainly isn't Harris either. It's some it's staff is basically
Yeah, it's Sullivan and Blinken.
is that yeah, okay, those are the two likely suspects. The same
because
sort of thing
because
happened.
because with Austin, like he was missing for 3 days and nobody noticed, so it's obviously not him.
Yeah, well, so yeah, like I said, this would be hilarious if it didn't have serious implications. We have, crises in Ukraine, in the Middle East going on, and the Straits of Taiwan, possibly near the Philippines, and the government is acting as if it's completely incompetent. As
Acting or is
yeah.
because I'm about to make a strong argument for is, but let's shall we just do a rehashing of kind of the
Yes,
current
please.
geopolitical environment and the
Yes,
drone
please.
blast? All right, let me lay it out because these two things are not unrelated, and I think that has to be driven home.
I agree.
So, few months back, maybe 6, 7, 8 months, I don't know the exact timeline, but as we're supplying ATACMS missiles to the Ukrainians, they targeted, several early warning Russian radars, right? And early warning Russian radars are meant to help detect a nuclear launch on our end, which is
Yes.
Completely, utterly stupid and incompetent. So let's start with that.
Yes.
Putin warned the U.S. several times, stop this crap. This is an act of war. Here's a red line. And we continued pushing and pushing. And then to the point where we authorized deep strikes with the ATACMS missiles deep into Ukrainian territory.
Yes.
I believe we, because you have to have U.S. technicians to operate some of this equipment, fired in, deep targets into Russia. Okay. And Putin finally said, this is enough. He tested something called the Oreshnik missile, which apparently, in one of the strangest synchronicities of my lifetime, means Hazel or Hazlett missile. It does.
Congratulations for
it's the Russian, it's the Slavic equivalent of a surname of somebody who lives near a hazel tree. So it's the equivalent to the Anglo-Saxon. Yeah. So anyway, they fire the Oreshnik. It's a MIRV, a multiple independent reentry vehicle. It has, I think, five independent warheads. They hit the ground, thud, 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 right? And it is a hypersonic missile, so Patriot can't shoot it down. Nothing can shoot it down.
No.
Okay. Now, what we're finding out, and this could be Russian propaganda, so just, kind of bear with me here and take it with a grain of salt. But if you just calculate based on the kinetic energy of the strike, right, it was like a sub-kiloton weapon. However, there's this argument that there's something called the Coulomb effect, which is when this round hits the ground, right? Not only do you have the kinetic energy, but of the strike from its mass, et cetera, mass times v, velocity squared divided by 2,
squared.
or one half mass time. Yeah, I said it right. Right. So not only do you have that effect, you get an extra explosive power because this thing is moving at such a velocity that the electrons are separated from the protons. The protons now, because there's no electrons to provide them from, kind of colliding into each other, create an enhanced effect in terms of energy release. So you got to get an amplifier at the target. Now, some people are estimating it's 1.5 kilotons. There are other people on Twitter who are saying that's just stupid. It's Russian propaganda, et cetera. But let's say it is 1.5.
The Russians propaganda
kilotons.
Using propaganda. I'm shocked.
I mean, I'll be honest. After living through the last 4 years, I think they're about as trustworthy as we are at this point.
As MSNBC, certainly.
Yeah, or any mainstream media outlet for that matter. But
that's an interesting
theory.
True. Yeah.
But if that is true, right, and I can't verify if it's true, so I'm not, if somebody debunks it right after, good on them. But 1.5 kilotons would imply 10% of the explosive power of Hiroshima or Nagasaki without the nuclear effect. Yeah. If that is true, that is a game changer, and that is the that is the veritable TNT equivalent of a tactical nuke. Okay, so I think the first time they used it, I'm not sure what the targets were, but I don't know what the loss of life is either. I think it was more of a demonstration than anything else.
Right.
So the mentally incompetent buffoons in the White House responded by firing a deep ATACMS missile strike, killing a bunch of Russians. Okay,
Yes.
so there is rumor that there's going to be another strike at the same time, and this is also important. And the reason I was able to figure this out is because this is the second time I'm going to stop saying drones. The UAPs started showing up over bases, and that was in Lakenheath, Feltwell, and Mildenhall. Okay, and the instant they showed up there on Twitter, I said, "We just moved nuclear weapons there." So a quick ChatGPT query confirms that we indeed, and there were newspaper articles all the way back into January that we were considering doing this, had moved the B-61-12 gravity bombs, right, which are tactical nuclear weapons with a yield of about 50 kilotons to Lakenheath. So, the time before that they showed up was over, as you know, Langley Air Force Base, right, which was in December of 2023. So who knows what was going on there? It was probably the same sort of thing. So anyway, we moved nuclear weapons there. Then they start appearing over Picatinny Arsenal. So what do they do at Picatinny Arsenal? There's also weapons design, testing, things like that. And I would bet there's maybe nuclear triggering devices or something that go through there. I don't know. I'm just speculating. Okay. Also, recently we received reports, and this hasn't reached the mainstream media, but I've seen video. The video was supplied by a 20-year U.S. Air Force veteran over Barksdale Air Force Base. Okay, now Barksdale Air Force Base is the home of the 2nd Bomber Wing. What's the 2nd Bomber Wing? The 2nd Bomber Wing pilots the B-52H Stratofortress. What does the B-52H Stratofortress do? Well, it's got an 8,800-mile range or an indefinite range with in-flight refueling, and they carry nuclear weapons or conventional weapons as strategic bombers. What else is going on there? Since 2020, 2021, 2022, I can't remember the exact date, they started to build a new facility there to house nuclear cruise missiles that would be delivered from these bombers. Okay, so they got a visit. Additionally, we found out just recently that Wright-Patterson Air Force Base had to shut down on Friday because they got a visit from UAPs. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And John,
that is the headquarters of the air staff. That's the headquarters for the air staff.
And that's also where the Blue Room is and all that other good stuff. And then we're not done yet. Just recently, there's a who knows if it's true yet, but I predicted a few days ago, maybe yesterday, I don't know, that we would see orbs over DC by Christmas. Well, that night they showed up. So we're starting to get something that's very similar to the UAP UFO flap of 1952. The other thing that's important to note, this will be near and dear to your heart too. So I'm hearing unconfirmed rumors. I don't know, my source is pretty good, but it has to be confirmed. We're still working through it. So you're familiar with Lawrence Livermore National Lab, right, John?
Yes, I am. That's where
so during a rainstorm in recent days, there was people reported a blue flash in the sky, and suddenly the power went out. So I don't know. Unverified, but what do they do, John, at Lawrence Livermore National Lab?
They light candles.
They test.
Well, I'm sorry.
They do simulations.
The power goes out. No, they design nuclear weapons there, and they carry out a lot of high energy experiments. Related to. There is a related to this Coulomb effect. This sounds like a garbled, lost in translation, or maybe a little Russian exaggeration of discussions that you could make certain isotopes change with enough energy input, and you get an energy release because the isotope changes, like from tungsten, whatever tungsten's standard isotope is, to a slightly different isotope, and there's an energy difference. It actually releases energy when you do this. It's like taking strontium 90 and turning it into strontium, whatever the standard strontium is, and getting all of that radioactive energy out all at once. So there was discussion of that. Of course, I don't know where it went. I just heard it was discussion in the open literature of, I came up with, in my science fiction, came up with what are called K capture explosives, where you get one of the electrons in the orbitals around a nucleus to be sucked in to the nucleus and neutralize the positive charge there, of course, releasing energy. And I speculated that, it was a science fiction idea that you could actually, by the way, this is a real effect that occurs in physics. You have certain nuclei that are unstable, and what they do is it's a regular nucleus with a bunch of electrons orbiting around it, and because of quantum mechanics, the nucleus just swallows one of its electrons, and changes into a different element because it neutralizes one of the protons, and it can release energy when it does that. And if you could get that to do that as a chain reaction all at once, you could make a kind of intermediate type of explosive between, standard fission and fusion explosives and something. So you could put 10 pounds of TNT equivalent in a 9mm bullet, basically, if you had this thing. But there was sort of discussion of these kinds of ideas, and then suddenly it was in open literature, and these discussions just sort of just disappeared. Everybody said, "Oh, no, that can't work," and then we didn't hear anything more about it. But it's possible the Russians are raising this as a possibility. I looked at the videos of the Resnick striking. One of the things that impressed me, this was obviously a very precision strike. This thing is highly accurate. They were hitting a factory in a highly, a city of 1 million people. They were hitting a factory, covering only maybe a square mile. But what's also interesting from looking at the videos is it did not look like they had actual high explosive warheads on the impacts. Did not have big flashes, and so it's possible the Russians just put Teflon in the warheads instead of explosive if they had, and this is the Russians, as we said in the business during the Cold War, the Russians being subtle. They hit the factory with chunks of Teflon rather than high explosive, and there's little notes inside saying, this could have been our super explosive.
Yeah, it's a demonstration.
Written in Russian.
It's a demonstration.
It's a demonstration, and it just shows that we're flirting with a nuclear war here. So yes, we have a very disturbed international situation. I mean, the people who are agitating for us the other people who are normally the adult supervision in these sorts of things is the British. And yet they contributed these Storm Shadow missiles to these strikes. And this is because they got this guy, they got a Labour government in charge in Britain now. And they hate Trump. And I think it's almost as if somebody's trying to create severe enough crises that they can prevent the inauguration from occurring. I know that sounds crazy.
That's the other speculation that's out there.
But if
Right.
it sounds crazy to us, but if you're crazy and work with a bunch of people who are crazy, then it seems logical. People actually had Pearl Harbor right on the table 2 days before it happened in Pearl Harbor. That's why Kimmel was court-martialed. They actually had it right on the table in front of them. And they looked at it and they said, well, maybe the Japanese are going to attack us here at Pearl Harbor. And the Japanese would never do that because that would trigger a war with the United States and they would lose. And so that would be a crazy man. Only a crazy man would do that. Well, the Japanese went ahead and did it. It's also rumored that 9/11 under one of the that the Clinton administration people had actually seen the whole 9/11 scenario and had it on the table in front of them. And they looked at it and said, nah.
Yeah, they definitely. I actually interviewed somebody who used to work for MI5, MI6 for 30 years. He was a precognitive dreamer. I shit you not. And he routinely thwarted IRA plots. He saw the Lockerbie bombing before it happened, put it in a affidavit. Well, this guy, Christopher Robinson, and he gets kind of, let's just say, I think he's shadow banned. Anything with him kind of gets kind of muted a little bit because I have multiple interviews with him and they just don't do as well. Nobody seems to be aware of him. But he told Christopher Mellon that this was coming. Or I can't remember if it was Chris. I shouldn't say that. He spoke to Christopher Mellon about something else. So take that back. That's wrong. That's wrong. I don't know. But he did tell the U.S. intelligence community. He passed along that he had a dream of planes hitting either in the UK or in New York City. In London or New York is kind of what he passed on. And he saw it about a year and a half in advance. I forget who he passed it on to. It wasn't Chris Mellon. I want to make sure that people don't take that away because that's not accurate. But we knew. We definitely knew.
You remember the National Security Advisor, in the Board of Inquiry that was inquiring into 9/11, and he was the National Security Advisor or some kind of high official in the Clinton administration. And he said he had to have access to the National Archives to check his notes on these meetings. And they found out he was sticking parts of the record into his underwear and smuggling them out of the building. And then he took
Sandy Berger.
Sandy Berger was taking documents from the National Archives, shredding them, and then flushing them down the toilet. And he was smuggling them out in his underwear. And so when people discovered this under the Bush administration, the reaction was just, such astonishment. They kind of gave him a slap on the wrist and took away his law license. That's all I could think of doing. I mean, it happened. The actual event happened under the Bush administration, so they obviously had missed things too. But there's always postmortems on these things like Pearl Harbor or 9/11, where the clues were there. It's just that people did not pay attention. Now, I say it's entirely possible that some people are thinking of creating such a severe international crisis or some sort of situation where they can somehow prevent Trump from being inaugurated. And I say that because I know it sounds crazy, but some people obviously in our government are in need of psychiatric help. In fact, I've heard that a large number of people are coming in together for therapy sessions since the election because they're so upset about how it turned out, and they have professionals coming in them and giving them counseling. And
are you talking about the FBI?
Have crying sessions? Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I don't know which agencies, but I know
there are reports that there were officials from the FBI calling the White House and crying when they heard Kash Patel was going to be in charge. I'm just relating it. You know what, John? They should be crying. After they spied on people like on Catholic churches in the South, after they set people up in this Whitmer assassination plot after they had, had
Yeah, the
their
Whitmer
assets
assassination.
like pulling people into January. I got to stop talking about politics, but they, there needs to be a
Yeah.
reset on government. There's no doubt about
My
that. Especially after this drone thing is just like is the straw that broke the camel's back. Like the way COVID was handled, everything. It's just
one of my bosses commented 2 weeks after 9/11 had happened, and I was in Washington D.C. when it happened, watching the whole thing unfold in real time, and suddenly we watched the Pentagon, people from the Pentagon running down the highway to get away from the Pentagon because the Pentagon has turned into a quadrangle because, one wall has been knocked down by an airliner flying into that. And my then boss commented to me, if 9/11 could happen, anything could happen, because it was so surreal and nightmarish when it was occurring. I'm just saying, don't think that anything is too crazy right now. We have a change of government coming up. The head of that new government has had 2 assassination attempts on him. And we've lost control of our airspace, apparently.
Well, we don't even know. Have we heard anything at all about the 2 would-be assassins? One guy's body was cremated within 12 days of the incident, and the other, I think he's in trial right now.
Well, we don't know anything about that fellow, who apparently was a world traveler. He was Ukraine. He bought a farm in Hawaii. He was wanted for bounce checks in North Carolina, and then he ends up in Florida. And in a gunfire incident with at the golf course. And so, I don't want to dwell on this. I don't want to sound partisan or anything like that. I'm just saying we're
not doing a good job right now, John, from that perspective. Look, we just don't like incompetence. We don't like incompetence, and we don't like being lied to. And between those 2 things, there's been enough of it. Okay.
I don't. If I was if let's just say we have to be. Thomas Jefferson put it best. He said, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty." You've got to be slightly paranoid if you're going to be a free person, because it's an unnatural state in the world. Most of the world's population does not enjoy democracy the way we do. And so, but anyway, so we have a very
the Middle East, John, is all about beards and mustaches. And Syria just flipped from a mustache to a beard. And for people who don't know what I'm talking about, basically, for stability to exist in Middle Eastern countries, you either have to back a sectarian or a secular dictator, a mustache, or a Islamist, a beard. So anyway, continue, John.
There's a saying in Islam, or maybe it's just a Middle Eastern tradition, predates Islam. Better 1,000 years of tyranny than 1 hour of anarchy. They like to err on the side of everything being nailed down, and the bazaar being safe for the merchants, etc. So, yes, suddenly the government of Syria has collapsed and been replaced with apparently 3 different factions, all of which are jihadists. So it's a very disturbed situation, but we should, and then this, what I claim is a UFO flap with a government Maskarova reaction occurring. The government knows what is actually at the core phenomenon of this and doesn't want to say. Sounds familiar. And so they're creating, they're making a smoke screen, and they actually arrested some people with drones. This was a very bad time to try and pull a stunt like this, because they're going to be absolutely dragged through the streets. over this. The government's going to make a big example out of them. And but this is very reminiscent of 1952 when they had the UFO flap over DC. The government had, the Pentagon had a long, like 2-hour news conference about that told the public basically nothing except that this was thermal inversions or sightings of Venus, or that was when they came up with thermal inversions, refracting radar beams.
Was that General Sanford, that one?
Yeah, he was, this guy's a World War II vet. Got to remember, this was in the middle of the Korean War. Mm-hmm. We had a hot war going on still in Korea, and this thing erupted over DC. And the government did the same thing. They said, don't worry about it. It's nothing. And then there was one incident where they had jet fighters chasing these things. And somebody took a picture of that, and the government confiscated the picture, saying that it was shot through official government window glass. Therefore, the government owned it. The story I heard, the backstory was that finally the government lost patience completely and just ordered the jets to start opening fire on the UFOs. And they actually blew a chunk off one, and the UFO incident stopped. It just stopped abruptly after that. Suddenly, it had exceeded we'd upped the ante in this little comedy high enough so that the other side folded. And so it was a classic episode in the UFO cover-up, and it's very similar to what's going on now. Government obfuscation and strange stuff in the skies. And this time over the center of the nation's, the center of the nation's government. So I just wanted to mention, I wrote this novel, Morning Star Pass, in 2003. It was Morning Star Pass, the collapse of the UFO cover-up. And I had stuff like this in that, including finally overflights of Washington, D.C. being pursued by jet fighters. Basically, the basic plot is two women, and of course, they're very glamorous news anchors, and they suddenly get these leaked documents. One is Asian American, and the other one is a bombshell blonde. They're both lovely. They're glamorous newscasters, so that's kind of the focus of the book. And the hero and his buddies are trying to protect them from the UFO government that finally wants to kill them. And they try to kill the Asian American, who's kind of the main person in charge of this thing, this effort to disrupt. They try to kill her, but they end up killing her Asian American parking attendant in a restaurant in downtown DC. And so she's actually, they see somebody with long black hair getting into this sports car that the Asian American heroine Cassandra owns, and they blow up her car. And she's arguing with some people who have been sent to try and protect her. And they get her out of there. And the reports are that she's dead, because they find the body of the Asian American parking attendant in the car and think it's her. And so everybody's reporting her dead. And then suddenly she walks into the studio of her news network and gets on the air and says, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated, she says. And so and what this does is it triggers in the novel, it triggers an emergency joint House Senate UFO cover-up hearings, complete with, and somehow they get a hold of a jar with a pickled alien in it as Exhibit A. And they basically ask the National Security Advisor, have you ever met anybody like this? And the National Security Advisor, who's sitting there, turns to his lawyer instead of answering the question. So anyway, what happens in the novel, and I call this the Morning Star scenario, is the UFO secret government actually attempts a coup d'etat. And there are tank battles in the streets finally because they say the UFO cover-up is too big to fail. So it's a very dramatic thing. And I wrote this in 2003. What's also interesting is I had the blonde kind of co-heroine. She's Ukrainian and has a Jewish mother. She was a child refugee from Ukraine from the collapse of the UFO collapse of the Soviet Union. So anyway, so I call that the Morning Star scenario, where there's actually an attempted coup d'etat in Washington, D.C. And in this case, to try and preserve the UFO cover-up. And so I've kind of mulled over this whole situation. And also in the book, by the way, I have these special forces people whose job is if there's a UFO flap and one of the UFOs actually crashes, they go out and cordon off the wreckage and keep everybody away and take away the hardware and the bodies and stuff like this. And so their job is to make sure that no crucial evidence gets made public if there's a UFO flap and one of the UFOs crashes during the flap, which happens apparently. And so during their
funny you mentioned that. Did you see this thing that was sent out to local, I think, firefighters in New Jersey, where
yes,
there are instructions not to approach a downed drone because of potential radiological materials? And you've seen commercial drones. There's not a single radiological.
There's not a single thing on it. Yeah, they don't do that.
Yeah, so why would you have that? Well,
why would you have this? Well, they want you to stay. If something strange crashes, they want you to stay away from it. And in this novel, it's a battalion of special forces, SEALs and Green Berets and stuff. They're just standard DoD guys, and their battalion, their operation is called Dark Carnival, or they call them the Carney. So they're out in this place in Xenia, Ohio, near Xenia, Ohio. I thought it was a neat name. They're out there in Xenia, Ohio, where there's a big UFO flap going on. And in the middle of this, they notice some people launching balloons with flares on them in the middle of this UFO flap. So they get really angry and they follow these people back to this broken down farm out in the middle of the countryside, where there's a trailer house, and they go walk up, these guys, big guys in these trench coats and hats, and they pound on the door, and the door opens, and it's a rival agency to their own that works for the UFO cover-up. And they say, "What are you doing here?" And well, we're just following orders. We're supposed to do a disinformation op, by launching balloons with flares on them, so people can claim that these were just they were all balloons with flares on them. And he says, "Why would you do that?" And the guy from the rival agency, who's kind of a character, and he just says, "Do I look like General Eisenhower to you? This is all above my pay grade," he says. So they leave and are very disgusted. And so, yeah, the government in my novel is constantly doing Maskarova kind of operations. When there's a real UFO flap, they immediately show up and put out a bunch of fake UFOs. The analogy I came up with is, if you have a gorilla that's escaped a secret government lab, and rather than alert people to be on the lookout for a gorilla which may be carrying some strange virus from your lab, you dress up people in gorilla suits and have them walk into stores with their masks off, under their arm. And so that if anybody sees a gorilla on the street, they just think it's this bunch of pranksters. And then you kind of ask an official, "Why would you do something like that?" When your real problem is this gorilla that's escaped from your lab. And the person says, "Because the gorilla is from outer space." So we can't talk about the actual gorilla.
All right, John, let's briefly go through the
Yes,
litany of descriptions that various elements of the government came up along the chronology of this, and I'll outline them for you, and we can discuss each in
absolutely.
detail. Okay, so the first thing that came out is that it was, and this is the other thing that I want to say is there's a lot of people, kind of UFO influencers, and people who have built up reputations on this topic, and the government's response has been so incompetent that they burn sources. Like there are people who, again, I'm not on any of these private signal
Yeah.
chats, but on private signal chats have literally destroyed their reputations overnight. So we began compiling a list. Now I'm not going to reveal the people on the list, but we know now who we can't trust. Like who sometimes they're going to be right, mostly right, but they're definitely beholden to something else. So here's the list of the way it started. So the first theory was transnational actors that are affiliated with Russia and China. Okay, that's number one. We'll come back to this because they all have ridiculous reasons where they went. Then the second one was let's have a massive secret, super secret training exercise over the most densely populated
that's one of my favorites.
State in the United States. Yeah, that was stupid. And then we get Allah Akbar, Iranian motherships, right? We have the Iranian drones from motherships, which was even crazier. And at that point, I think after that came out, then the Defense Department said, okay, we don't know. They're not us. They're not the enemy. They're not like a peer competitor. We don't know what they are. Okay. So then the very next day, it was, everybody in New Jersey is just psychotic. It's just a mass delusion. They're just seeing planes.
Smoking funny cigarettes.
Yeah, this is a Mayorkas. That prick Mayorkas. This is a Mayorkas special.
Yes.
Okay. But trust the experts. Trust the experts who have since November 18th been unable to control these, a U.S. airspace at all, like zero control. Okay. Yeah. Trust the experts. Hey, excuse my language, everybody, but hey, Mayorkas, go fuck yourself. Okay. So anyway, so then after that, the next narrative, and they're getting better. They're getting better. This one I had to think about.
They're getting better.
For about 2 seconds. Okay. And that was dirty bomb. We got super secret drones that are detecting gamma radiation over the Northeast, and we don't want to let anybody know.
I saw that one.
That was a good one, but it's easy to dispel. Well, actually, I shouldn't be talking about it now. That was the next one. And then another one I kind of put out there because I just wanted to be, comprehensive, but I quickly dispelled it, was that there was some sort of a radiation leak from the Salem nuclear reactor, and they were also using these drones to detect where the leak was and all that stuff. But there are reasons that are easily dispellable for both of them. Okay. And then I'm trying to think what I think that's where we are. I'm not sure if we have any crazier ones.
Forgot to mention the scenario. Well, you may have. This is a scenario I've heard. It's down on the list of probabilities, but this is the French. The French are responsible for this. They actually have a submarine off the coast launching these drones.
Why?
Macron is upset with us, so he's. I'm just joking. If this didn't have such serious implications, I say again, this would be hilarious. This would be like Airplane 3, No,
but it is hilarious. It's just you're seeing utter incompetence.
Incompetence.
And there are many reasons for this. Part of it is just the way that our society incents people. The smartest people in society right now don't go into STEM. They go into computer, like data science, computer programming,
and they go into AI
and finance. Those are like where all the smartest people go, and that's it. Like
that's where the money is.
So
that's where the money is. And
then there's something else too. But
okay.
Well, it begins with a D and it ends in an I, but I'm not going to say it.
Good. You shouldn't say that.
No, I have on this. I say it all the time.
That's okay. That's okay.
My audience knows. My audience knows exactly what I'm talking about.
This government, this is a government that's going out of power, in charge of, a real crisis. And it's easy to see why they're going out of power at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And, but, like I return to the problem of, we're going to gather how many thousand people on the Washington, D.C. mall under these circumstances. I don't think that's a good idea. I think this inauguration should be done virtually to maximize safety. We do not have control of the airspace over the entire Northeast. And we have a president being inaugurated who's had 2 assassination attempts. We have a very disturbed international situation. And once again, I go back and I'm repeating myself. We do not have control of our airspace over Washington, D.C. So I think that I submit that to err on the side of safety, we should have a inauguration that's mostly done virtually, just to maximize safety.
I would just hold it out in the open,
and that's
it's
bad. That shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, I would just do it out in the open. Just we need to flaunt.
Somebody didn't like that, apparently.
What did they say?
I'm sorry?
What did they say? You said somebody didn't like that?
Who?
Oh, I don't know.
But I said suddenly our signal got disrupted. Who the hell knows?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, I'm only one guy. I'm not.
That's fair. Well, I wrote a book recently called Cosmic Awakening, where I had I said what really happened at Roswell. It was a shoot down, I believe, by the government protecting the original nuclear weapon stockpile. And it was obvious that I ran afoul of an obscure school of literary criticism, because immediately somebody posted a very nasty review on Amazon, and I had asked several of my friends, to buy the book and read it, and if they liked it, make a positive review. And several of them reported to me that they liked the book and they tried to give it, and the reviews were rejected by Amazon.
Mm-hmm. Funny how that works, isn't it, John? Funny how that works.
Huh? I just realized, okay, somebody didn't like the book.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's about viewing the whole UFO phenomenon as part of our kind of initiation into the cosmic fraternity. And, the truth is pretty easy to summarize. We're not alone in the universe. Some of the people who are our neighbors in the stars have come here. And just like on Earth, some people are very friendly and some people are not. And God is obviously taking care of us. We're going to be fine. I think
John,
we're through to this.
Just when I thought our government was at peak incompetence, I literally just saw this.
What's that?
Gang of 8 member Representative Jim Hines. You would hear it as his latest theory is Gang of 8. So the people with the most classified intelligence in Congress. Okay.
Yeah.
He suggests the latest drone flap is likely the result of teenagers with Walmart drones.
I'm amazed that I didn't think of that one. You know,
I think the
Sean,
Air Force. I think the Air Force should hire them immediately because they
I
know how to
think the Air
penetrate
Force should
the
hire
most
them
sophisticated
immediately.
air defense system in the world.
We have, yes,
Uh,
Walmart has managed to defeat the most sophisticated air defense system in the world around our nation's capital.
it's
And
Walmart strong. Walmart strong.
Walmart strong.
How do these people think that we're just like we're
Well,
all buffoons?
well, like I said, some things are crazy, like somebody coming up with that story and thinking that the public would buy it. But it doesn't look crazy to them. In their own little circle, they think, well, I'm a big congressman and I can say this, and people will believe me because I have congressman or senator by my name, you know. And yeah, stuff that looks crazy to most of us, to a crazy person or a person who's, under delusion, operating under delusions, doesn't look crazy. One of my best examples of this was Adolf Hitler waited 2 days after.
John, for my Christmas present, I want a Walmart drone the size of an SUV. I'll pay for half. You and I could do a 50-50 on it, and we could get a Walmart drone. Yeah, 100%.
I don't know. I think it should be 30-70 myself.
But we could penetrate U.S. airspace. We could go anywhere we want. It'd be great. We could get all the secrets. Area 51. We could go there right now.
Area 51 would just fly out there, you know.
Yeah. Nobody's gonna shoot us
down
because
these two.
Oh, we gotta do the lights off, John. When we see a helicopter come up, lights off, and they're like, "Where'd it go?
They can't see us now because they don't have infrared sensors. They're not sophisticated enough to carry those." And one person told me, but you got to remember, the public, a large fraction of the public, in fact, the heroine in my novel, Morningstar Pass, actually says this. She says, it's really easy to keep secrets that no one wants to know. Mm-hmm. Some people find the idea that we're actually being visited with ETs, that's the core phenomenon that this is revolving around, that this is built around, that they'll believe just about anything except that. And you can imagine that, people will actually still believe at this point that they wouldn't normally believe if the government said the sun is going to come up tomorrow. They wouldn't believe them. But, when Mayorkas says, you guys should stay calm, there's nothing to be excited about. No, we don't know what these drones are or where they come from or who's launching them, but they're not a threat. They're not a threat. Ignore those radiation warnings we talked about the other day.
Yeah. I mean, look, they're only flying over nuclear power plants, reservoirs, and weapons development facilities. So there's nothing to worry about.
They've warned firemen, if one crashes, stay away. It could be radioactive. And then at the same time, they turn around and say, there's no, the FBI guy in front of the Congress said, well, there's no threat. There's no threat.
Well, meanwhile, people watching this stream, there's some ISIS operative going, I'm going to Walmart to get some radiological materials from a SUV-sized drone. Like, they don't even listen to the implications of the arguments they're making.
It's just, it's not a good day for the U.S. government as a functioning entity. Let me put it this way: if you told somebody from the 50s that we were still dealing with stuff like this, they'd just gone through the Washington D.C. UFO flap, and then you say, well, 80 years later, there's this flap in New Jersey and New York City and Langley Air Force Base, just to the south of the Capitol, and now this stuff to the north of the Capitol. It's it's and if you told them that, they would say, that's astonishing. That the government hasn't yet figured this out, or they would put it, the government hasn't figured this out yet.
But they
or
have. That's the thing. They have.
They have figured it out. They
and
know
the
exactly
reason
what's going
and
on.
the evidence for that is simply a Donald J. Trump tweet, because he receives a daily a president's daily briefing, intelligence briefing, and what he said was that DOD knows exactly what these things are, but they're remaining silent on the matter. So
Well, they're okay.
Yeah.
So what are the possibilities, Sean? These are from the French, which have a nuclear submarine.
We didn't talk about the actual, like, what these actually could be. So there's several things, and I know where you stand on it, but I'm gonna lay them out. And some of them are gonna sound crazy. Okay, some could be some weird natural phenomena. Maybe there's like a 5-dimensional weather system that manifests itself as weird electrical discharges, etc. Okay, could be one. 2, it could be some sentient. It could, but 2, it could be some sentient life form that we're not aware of, but is hyper intelligent, is in the back. This is like crypto-terrestrial hypothesis. The Russians during Soviet times saw 2 kinds of entities. Some were biologics, and then other were what they call plasmoids. Right. So a lot of it could be why some of these some of them look like airplanes, but they're like badly rendered airplanes, right? Plasmoids. And you're a plasma physicist, so I mean, is it possible for plasma life form? Right? I don't know.
We got to be expert in making balls of fire in microwave ovens. We published an article on it. It was my most cited article. I got the most citations on that article than anything I'd done before that. And we could just push a button and these balls of fire would fly out of this thing in the bottom of a modified microwave oven and fly around inside, or we could even trap them in one of those hurricane mantles for a mantle, a kerosene lamp, the glass thing. We could trap them in there and just have them run indefinitely. The glass wouldn't even get warm. That was the amazing thing. And we were finally making them as big as soccer balls in this one. We called it the doghouse. We used industrial microwaves, which were bigger. And my lead technician was this Italian American, and he came home we've gone up to New Hampshire to this site where we could use this big microwave generator. And we made these balls of fire in midair inside this chamber. And they were as big as soccer balls. And we were all wearing goggles. But he walked into his house after getting back on the airliner and with me, and he went to his house up in Maryland, and I went to my apartment in Virginia. He walks in the front door, and his wife looks at him, says, "Where the hell have you been?" And he says, "Well, I've been up in New Hampshire with Brandenburg. We were making these balls of fire." And she says, "Why have you got a sunburn?" And he went and looked in the mirror. He had a white stripe across his face, and his forehead and his cheeks and his chin were all sunburned, and we'd gotten welder sunburn. And he called me up, and I just walked in the front door of my apartment, and he called me up. He says, "John, look in the mirror." So I did. I looked like a negative of a picture of a raccoon. And so, if you see ball lightning, and by the way, where I grew up, I saw ball lightning 3 times as a kid. First 2 times I didn't even know what it was, but finally the third time I saw it, it was during a snowstorm with lightning, which I'd never seen before, and suddenly this blue ball of fire came falling out of the sky, and a friend of mine and I were caravanning through the mountains during this snowstorm, and we both saw it, and we stopped. As soon as we got into town, we pulled off at the first bar and went inside and said, "Did you see what I saw?" And the guy says, "Yeah, let me have my beer first, then I'll discuss it." So yeah, we both saw this thing, and yeah, it was a blue ball of fire that was hanging around under the clouds. We'd seen it earlier, and then it fell just by the highway where we were driving into town. And so nature can make these things, and people can make them. We were hired by the Air Force to do that. We were forbidden to call it ball lightning by the Air Force, by the way, as a condition for getting our funding. So we called it PIA, or Pia, after Pia Zadora, the Italian movie starlet. And because it was persistent ionization in air, we called it persistent ionization. So anyway, as I said, my chief technician was Italian American, so we named it Pia. So anyway, I'm very aware of things like this occurring in nature, but that's not what this is. These things have flashing lights on them, and they turn off their lights when anybody approaches them with a police helicopter. So that's not what this is. The stuff we saw just looked like balls of fire, and it would we'd turn off the microwaves that would go out, but it would hang around for like half a second. I mean, it was amazingly durable. I loved it, by the way. The academics said that what we were doing was impossible. We went to a conference, and these people got up and showed by computer simulations that it was impossible to create these kinds of things. And then we actually rolled in our microwave oven and made it in front of everybody. And, the people who had told us it was impossible did not rush up to me and shake my hand, congratulate me. No, they looked like in fact, our tires were slashed. I'm sorry. I'm exaggerating.
Four more possibilities, John. Four more possibilities.
What possibilities besides the French and ball lightning?
Yes. Well, plasmoids and cryptoterrestrials.
Ghosts. And
no. So there's kind of the extraterrestrial hypothesis. There's the interdimensional hypothesis, things coming through wormholes and whatever showing up here.
Sure.
There's the future human hypothesis. Maybe they're trying to prevent a nuclear war. And then this one I think is ridiculous, but I have to put it out there for completeness, is the whole Project Bluebeam thing, right? They're all doing Bluebeam so they could declare an alien invasion and declare national emergency. Yeah. I don't think it's that.
So that would lead to a secret government coup d'etat, right?
Yeah. So what do you think? I mean, and there's probably any number of permutations and combinations of that, right? What do you see it as? Somebody asked this earlier. I was just kind of spinning it up until we got to this.
I stick to my original hypothesis. This is a UFO flap that they're doing. The government is doing Maskurova on it. They may have even hired these idiots to go out and launch drones
to confuse people. Because right now they screwed up the narrative so badly. Their only play now is just to flood the zone with noise.
That's right. Yeah. If you don't want people to see the penguin, you blow up penguins and put them around every place, so that when people see a real penguin, they think it's one of the inflatable.
You also call it drones. You also call it mystery drones instead of UAPs.
You call them mystery drones. Yeah, drones.
That was a little slight of psychological warfare right there.
Well, even the term UAP, I say my story is it was cooked up over a bottle of rum one night at a corner office in the Pentagon. They got 5 corners on the Pentagon. It was originally planned with 4 sides, but they didn't have enough corner offices for VIP, so they had to make it 5-sided. So anyway, these people are just sitting around drinking rum, and they wanted to come up with a new name for this. So they came up with the name UAP to convert all ufologists into uapologists. And I told that to a mutual friend, Don Ecker, the former Special Forces guy.
You know what? I need to bring him back on because there were.
Yes, you do.
He's observed some even darker parts of this, like the whole, like in the 90s, that in New York they had such a huge number of cattle mutilations that they had to secretly ship in cattle from other states so that they didn't alarm the population. Did you hear that one?
Oh yeah. They do stuff like that. They
And there are also human mutilations associated with that, and that stuff, abductions and human mutilations, they don't, the powers that be do not want you talking about any of that.
No. I've been waiting for reports of cattle mutilations in this that will confirm that this is actually.
There's already been some recently in Colorado, actually.
Well, they're having them in Oregon, and we just had a bunch of UFO sightings in Oregon over Eugene, and but in Eastern Oregon they've had a lot of cattle mutilations. I thought if I moved up here from the Southwest, I would escape that. No, you can't escape it any place now. It's and of course we all know that's a cult from California, right? You know,
with precision lasers and very powerful hoist equipment that is so quick you can't see it happen.
But people are afraid, especially the cattle mutilation aspect, and they don't want to even think about human mutilations. And so if the government says that, they will, even though they don't believe the government's credibility is very low now, they will still believe it because they don't want to believe the alternative, that somebody could come down and do stuff like that to cattle, and the government can't seem to do anything about it. And it's, well, I noticed the people are saying, well, why doesn't the local police have the ability to just shoot these things down? And Mayorkas says, we don't have authorization to do that. He's Department of Homeland Security. And then you say, well, who does
He's the only one who does. He's the only one who does have authorization because of posse comitatus, right? We can't, U.S. military can't do any of this stuff unless they're authorized.
We don't have authorization to shoot down something violating our airspace?
Well, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
9/11. 9/11, they may have shot one of the aircraft down.
Yeah, they did. They were about ready to do that. They were going to.
Yeah, it's the Shanksville, Pennsylvania one. They may or may not have. I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of the. And by the way, I explored this in my science fiction. In my science fiction scenario, the UFO cover-up is collapsed. There's an attempted coup d'etat, and then that's crushed by forces loyal to Congress. And the two women, the last scene is of them in the hospital recovering from their wounds and looking at the morning star rising in the morning and having hope. But the hero is also in the same hospital. He got wounded during the storming of this alien base finally to rescue the one heroine, the main heroine. And his buddies keep coming to visit him. And they say, his name is Schwartzman, Robert Schwartzman, meaning man of darkness, basically. And they say, well, boss, they always call him the boss. They say, boss, every agency in town is shredding all its documents and bleaching all its memories of any involvement in the UFO cover-up. Nobody knows anything suddenly about it. So in other words, the cover-up actually survives even this, finally they're the aliens go to war with us, the UFO aliens. Fortunately, they're as incompetent as they are advanced. So they, but anyway, what I discovered was in a lot of things like 9/11 and other things that happen, there's an enormous, the thing that the reaction of a lot of government agencies is to go into CYA mode. cover your ass.
Mm-hmm.
And they just start shredding documents and, bleaching memories and engaging in group amnesia sessions where, we didn't know anything about it, because whenever a fiasco like this happens, there's always signs ahead of time, like Pearl Harbor, and but nobody wants to be left holding the bag. So, what did you know, and when did you know it? They destroy records after these things happen, so they can't.
By the way, have
be
you seen any
investigated.
reports coming out of Russia or Ukraine? Same sort of things. I would imagine the Russians are seeing these too, but I haven't done any work looking at it.
Yeah, well, if you go flying something like this over Russia, they will just scramble jet fighters and shoot you down. That's it's probably one of the reasons we don't have any reports of it in Russia is probably they're smart enough not to fly over Russia. One of the reasons from the very beginning of the whole UFO phenomenon, after Roswell and everything, it was to assume it was either an American or British spy aircraft and shoot it down. And they finally, after losing a bunch of MiGs, finally did bring one down near one of their top secret facilities. They're kind of White Sands facility, Kapuskin Yar, I think.
Kapuskin Yar.
And, the Russians rolled up. Yeah, Kapuskin Yar. And the Russians rolled up with their furry hats, with all their AK-47s in the back of this Deuce and a Husky truck. And they got out there. These are Interior Minister troops, not the regular army, Red Army. And they pried open the hatch on this thing with Krobarskis. And they look in there and they say, "Нет Amerikanski." These are not Americans. And so the Russians had their own Roswell moment where they just, they realized, this is not Americans, but they're probably working with the Americans. So at that point, the Russians were, if you get invaded by Nazi Germany and you lose 30 million people, it makes you a little paranoid. And now Pearl Harbor and 9/11 should be our guide, that when the stakes get high enough, even crazy stuff can appear like rational. My favorite thing was Hitler declaring war on the United States after Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor. He's at war with the Soviet Union. His troops have just been pushed back 100 miles from Moscow. He's lost this battle in the Russian winter. He's at war with the British Empire. And now he's at war. Now he's declared war on the United States. And his chief of armaments was this guy. He was a PhD engineering guy named Tod, which in German means death.
Dead, yeah.
Like Totenkopf. So he comes to visit Hitler, and you can imagine the secretary announcing, "Mein Führer, Dr. Death is here to see you." So Hitler ushers him in, and this meeting apparently happened in January of 1942, just after Pearl Harbor. And they, his armaments minister said, "We do not have enough war production to compete with, the British Empire and the Soviet Union."
Was that Albert Speer?
No, this was not Speer. This was Dr. Todt.
Oh, okay. I got it.
But what happened was Hitler listened to him say, "We have to sue for peace. We've conquered most of European Russia. We've conquered Europe, but we can't fight a long war with we have the three superpowers on Earth, and we can't. They're going to crush us in the long run." And Hitler said, "Thank you, Dr. Death, for telling me this report." Dr. Death went and got on an airplane to fly to Poland to supervise stuff on the Eastern Front, and his plane blew up in midair. And Albert Speer replaced him, who was a yes man. He was a smart yes man, but he was still a yes man for Hitler. So stuff, everybody knew that when Hitler decided to declare war on the United States after Pearl Harbor, he waited like 3 days. Everybody knew that was a crazy thing to do, but they went and did it anyway. And he was in charge. He had the SS backing him up, who considered his word was law. So stuff that appears crazy to rational people does not appear crazy to people who are irrational and delusional and who work in a small circle. I mean, 4 people sitting in a room talking to each other can convince themselves of just about anything. And so we should not rule out crazy scenarios just because they seem crazy to us, which is why I say again, I think the inauguration should be done virtually, because we do not have control of our airspace, and we have a person being inaugurated who has survived 2 assassination attempts. I mean, by the 9/11 standard of craziness, anything can happen at this point. Anything, and we have a real surreal scenario. We're the most advanced military power on Earth, and we can't do anything to apparently make these the drones, quote unquote, go away. So,
all right, now, John.
Yes.
Given the incompetent way that this was handled, and just the general incompetence of those 4 elites that are sitting in a room making insane decisions.
Yes.
Let's say it's the
White House. Let's say they're sitting in the basement of the White House.
And let's say it's the extraterrestrial hypothesis, and these are grays or whatever you want to say.
Yeah, they're grays, okay? Probably.
How do you think, if these things showed up, where do you think the American people's allegiance would it be? Would it be to the elites in Washington? Or do you think they would quickly, don't answer it yet, do you think they would quickly just say, you can have them? I have a man on the street who's going to answer that question first before you do.
A man on the street. All right.
A man on the street. So stand by. Okay.
Standing by. I'm drinking my coffee, pouring a little gin in there, prepare myself for the answer.
This is surprisingly hard to find. All right, stand by. All right, you see that?
This message is for Governor Phil Murphy and the alien overlords. If you are not Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey or an alien overlord, you can scroll right on by. Good. Now that we've got that out of the way, I just have a question for either one of you.
Man on the street seems.
Do we still have to go to work or school? That's it. Because all this pussyfooting y'all doing, we don't care. It's not sensitive information at all anymore. We might have aliens in New Jersey, and we just want to know what the next course of action is. This not like the old days. See, the thing about the old days, they the old days. We're not panicking. We don't care what information you're hiding. We just want to know if we have the day off. Let me address Governor Phil Murphy first. From what I know, you're a decent guy. All right. I saw you. You said you're working with the White House, the FBI, the CIA. You're trying to figure out what these obscure objects are, right? These drone-like objects are, and you just can't say for certain what they are, right? And but you said it's safe to go outside. Well, it seems like we had a impasse. Hey, as the people would say. If you don't know what the objects are, why am I going outside? Okay, move you over now. Let's assume they're aliens. So to the alien overlords, I speak for all of New Jersey and some of Philadelphia and New York. You can have the areas, guys. Listen, on our list of demands, okay, we just want to know, as long as you can promise healthcare, basic housing, and a functional leadership,
Emphasis on functional leadership.
our life is yours. Go ahead, colonize the
Functional,
land.
leader,
We're willing to
functional
secede from the
leadership.
United States. Ain't shit down here anyway. Okay, as long as y'all are halfway decent creatures, you can have it. All this, you see, back in the day, this is how they used to get us. You know, you hear the word alien, you go, but we're done. We're tired. We've done enough. And on top of the fact, to the alien overlords, you're coming right in time. A Trump presidency is about to take place, another one. How about this? Y'all take us on lease. Little 4-year agreement. Go ahead and scoop us, put the beam down, UFO beam down, grab all of New Jersey up, take us up in the sky. We'll spend 4 years with y'all. If we like it, you can consider it like a rental. If we like it, we'll stay with y'all. If you don't, y'all can dump us right back in this hellhole. All right? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. So,
well, there you have it. The man on the street in
you're
Jersey.
the representative of New Jersey, parts of Philadelphia, and parts of New York. That's his bid. How do you think the rest of the population is going to react to this?
You want my reaction?
Yeah. Look, if they showed up in my backyard, John, they were friendly, they can have the elites in Washington. They can have them. They've run us into the ground. Like, they can have them.
I just want to have a nice, happy holidays. How about we can just get through the holidays without anything happening? And then the new year, you know, the run up to Inauguration Day, that's next year. Can't we just have a nice, quiet holidays, you know, kill a few bottles of wine and, you know, to me, enjoying the holidays is giving them the big finger. The government, the aliens, everybody just saying, bleep you, I'm going to enjoy my holidays. I mean, really, I think that's
John, I just want to
attitude.
buy my SUV-sized drone from Walmart and
Walmart,
visit the Iranian
right.
and visit the Iranian mothership. I want to, like, I want to take a visit, check it out, you know.
Oh yeah. I mean, that one poor congressman was told by the deep, dark sources.
To his credit, he did say he was told. He didn't
he was
and now he's
told.
getting tarred and feathered for it. Yeah, so they set him up.
They set him up. Well, they sacrificed him as a
he didn't back some secret project or something like that. So they set him up with some like embarrassing intel.
Yeah.
That's what happened there, in my opinion.
I just think we ought to, as an act of defiance, enjoy our holidays and pretend, just wake up in the morning, tell ourselves it's all going to be okay. And the problem can be dealt with next year. But at the same time, I just want people to realize this situation is so crazy, even crazy things could happen now.
Yeah, I'm more worried about the current regime pushing us into nuclear war with Russia. That's, by all intents, like the back chatter is that we're closer than most people think. So
I went through. I decided to embark on my investigation of Mars with a bunch of other people because I'd gone through the nuclear winter, the release of the nuclear winter studies, followed immediately by Operation Able Archer 1983. You can look it up on Wikipedia. We're as close to a war, nuclear war, as we were in the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Did I ever tell you about the Lynn
Only it
Buchanan
was-
story? The Lynn Buchanan story where he took out all the skiffs in Europe on both sides accidentally with a psycho.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
I think that
Both-
happened. I think that happened around Able
Yes.
Archer.
Well,
He may
the
have caused. He
Russians
may have
came-
indirectly caused it because they imagine if you're the Russians and your skiff network suddenly shuts off.
Yes.
And the U.S. is running some big nuclear exercise in 1983.
Yes, they were.
So I think that's why it's classified because it happened at Augsburg, Germany, right? But
Yep.
I don't know. I'm just speculating. But when I threw that theory out and when I was interviewing him, his face went white. So
Yeah.
just
I
putting
know
that out
Lynn
there.
Buchanan. He's a great guy, and knows that whole business, remote viewing in and out. And by the way, when I was in D.C., the story I heard was that remote viewing was considered rather kind of a hot potato by the Pentagon and the agencies, but it had been right often enough, where they would
Better
get.
than chance. It's a lot
It
better.
was
than
better
chance.
than chance, and so they could not stop using it because it had been right often enough where they'd been able to verify information that originally came from remote viewing was then checked out by other means and found out to be correct. And so that had happened often enough that they said, we cannot afford to set this aside. We can't afford to lose this capability. So guys like Lynn Buchanan did earn their paychecks. And, I went through Operation Able Archer. I was working at Sandia National Labs, and the nuclear winter stuff had just come out, and morale at the laboratory collapsed. People were in despair. They were afraid. The nuclear winter stuff told them that there was no chance of saving their wives and children. If the blast and fallout didn't get them, starvation and hunger would get them later. That was the story I heard from several people. And then we went through Able Archer. We weren't told exactly what was going on, but we could see, because we were on a military base, we were Kirtland Air Force Base. We could see all of this military activity going on, and we knew something was up. And so that's what I went into the holidays kind of in despair, thinking that we were going to have a nuclear war by accident. And what had happened apparently is the Russians had decided the big NATO exercise, Able Archer 83, was a Trojan horse, that we were going to launch an attack using this big NATO exercise as a smokescreen to launch the attack from. And finally, adult supervision on both sides. The people in NATO, through their intel services, figured out, oh my God, they think this is real. We better back off. And the Russians decided that, that was a crazy idea, that the Americans would never just attack us like that because they don't want to be annihilated in the nuclear strike that would follow. So finally, everybody calmed down and we got through the holidays. So Nuclear Winter came out at the end of October. It was Carl Sagan's greatest achievement and the one he was most criticized for. And then Able Archer happened about second week in November. And I believe the Nuclear Winter announcement, which came out in a Sunday newspaper insert, may have prevented the war from going nuclear, may have prevented a nuclear war. So, what I'm saying now is, in fact, my analogy is if you don't know where the submarine, there's a submarine down there and you're supposed to guard the mouth of Pearl Harbor. Finally, you don't know where the submarine is that's trying to get into the harbor. So you just take your best guess is just start dropping a pattern of depth charges. So I'm just saying, I think we should be on the lookout for even crazy scenarios happening to prevent the inauguration of the new government. We should also, in fact, everyone in the military who's listening to this should remember their first duty is to support the Constitution, not any particular faction in this country or even of a secret government. Their oath before God is to support the Constitution of the United States. So we should not rule out crazy sounding scenarios, since we've seen crazy scenarios actually happen. Pearl Harbor and 9/11, and Able Archer, 83, we could have had a nuclear war. And that's because the Russians felt cornered, and they were paranoid. They were even more paranoid than they are usually. I'll also, by the way, I'm also going to make an observation. By the way, very curiously, the blonde heroine in my novel Morningstar Pass, who helps the Asian American, she's actually Ukrainian with a Jewish mother. I wrote this in 2003, and she's a refugee from Ukraine. She lost her mother. In fact, her mother was a medical technician at Chernobyl. And they're two sides of America. She's an emigre from Ukraine. Grew up, the Asian American grew up rich in San Diego, was homecoming queen, cheerleader, went to USC, got a degree in journalism, became a junior anchor at a, LA news desk. And the blonde grew up in Cleveland and went to Cuyahoga Community College. Got a 2-year degree in journalism and ended up as a weather girl on the local news station, and managed to work her way up to finally becoming a news anchor at this kind of internet news service. And they bring down the UFO cover-up, and finally the UFO cover-up people dismiss them as no one's going to pay any attention to those two bimbos. And the head of the UFO cover-up, in fact, wants to recruit the Asian to be his spokeswoman for the coming new order. And because it was written in 2003, so right after 9/11. So it's a crazy scenario, but like I said, there's an attempted coup d'etat by people in the government who decide the UFO cover-up is too important to fail. It's too big to fail. And that's crushed. And the secret UFO base, which is near a place called Morningstar, Colorado, is finally stormed by the U.S. military and taken out. And so it'll make a great movie. Great science fiction movie. And
hopefully it doesn't become reality. Are you familiar with the researcher Eric Wargo, Time Loops, that guy?
No, I'm not familiar with him.
He does a long history in this book called Time Loops about precognition and people who predicted events inadvertently in literature and things like that. I'm just hoping that because you're right, this is the perfect setup.
Part of my novel is already turning into prophetic. If you say there are orbs now over Washington, D.C., that's in the novel. Finally, the two women are up on the rooftop of their news network, and they've both started smoking again after quitting years earlier, and they're both up there smoking. And their boss comes up and tells them to quit smoking. She says it's a bad influence on the rest of the people. And his name's Manny Berkowitz. And they say, Manny, if we live long enough to get lung cancer, we'll consider that success. And then they're seeing lights in the sky, and they're seeing jet fighters.
By the way, breaking news, there's right as we speak, apparently there are orbs, or I don't know orbs, but there is UAP activity over Wright-Patterson Airfield right now.
Oh, that's bleeping marvelous.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. Air Force can't protect. That's where the air staff is located. Supposedly the headquarters of the U.S. Air Force is at Wright-Patterson. And they can't protect, they can't control. This is the U.S. Air Force can't control airspace over its own headquarters. And so, and I
time to bring in Doge. Maybe we can chop off maybe $500 billion from, the budget of the military. That's what's happening right now. So I think everybody in government right now, with this feckless, completely, utterly incompetent and buffoonish reaction to this situation, by either not telling people the truth or just because they're inept, utterly inept. Like every lie that they've told has been debunked almost immediately or in real time. So what they're doing right now, and I don't think they realize it, is the permanent bureaucrats who are in power, who are mismanaging this thing, are spelling their own demise, because people are going to look at this. They're going to look at the response to COVID, and they're just going to say, you want to cut 50% of the defense budget? Go ahead. Sounds like a good idea to me. Fewer taxes for me. Sounds good.
We're not getting our money's worth if they can't control the airspace over Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
John, they can't even control the narrative.
No. And that's and by the way, like I said, that's what happens in the novel. They're standing on the rooftop arguing with their boss about him, that they both started smoking. And then they start seeing lights in the sky over DC, and jet fighters suddenly arrive and are chasing them. And so they said, well, okay, Manny. they dash out their cigarettes, and we see your point. And they get down inside the building again. And but their attempts on both their lives before the thing is done, and the government, the secret government is being pressured by the ETs. This is This is like the Israeli Air Force overflying Beirut and making sonic booms, just to remind everybody in Beirut who controls the airspace over Lebanon. And when there was an attempted coup in Manila, I think it was 1979, the U.S. Air Force, from a local air base they had in the Philippines, rolled all its jet fighters out and had them just fly over Manila to remind, and what they did is they convinced the troops who were trying to take over the government from Cory Aquino that they should just go home to their barracks. This is called classic geopolitical intimidation. Show that you control the airspace over someplace, and the way this ended in Washington, D.C. in 1952 is they finally just had jet fighters up there with a shoot on sight order, and they opened fire on the, they apparently shot a chunk off of one UFO, and the UFO activity all stopped. The United States government finally raised the ante in the poker game high enough that the aliens didn't want to play anymore. And, the best way to win a war, according to Sun Tzu, is to intimidate your enemies and persuade them that resistance is futile. If you come up to our fortified city, he said, don't put up catapults and dug siege lines around there. It'll take you 6 months to, siege. He said, just pay somebody in the city to open the gate in the middle of the night and let your troops in. He says, that's much better. Best way to win is without any fighting at all. So let's say these are ETs trying to intimidate them. Show them that they're going to have to start fighting. This means they're automatically put on a non-optimal trajectory. And I'm entirely confident that we will get through this situation, and our future will end up like Star Trek. I believe that.
So, Sean, how do you think this is going to pan out from now until January 20th? Because it's not going to stop until at least January 20th, because you have us.
Well, I think it could stop. You know, here's the problem. Let's say you and I are sitting in the Pentagon, and some general walks into our office and says, well, I want a plan to make this thing stop. And so we both say, okay, let's shut down the entire airspace over the Northeast and now Ohio. In fact, let's ground all airliners and all drones. Anything that flies is going to open fire on it.
Yeah, anything, if it flies, it dies.
If it flies, it dies. And we tell that to the generals who have asked us for a solution. And they say, oh, no, not in the middle of the holidays. We can't shut down air traffic. I mean, it's vacation season. I mean, they immediately say, oh, no, we can't do that. But remember, after 9/11.
January 2nd, maybe?
Maybe January 2nd. You remember after 9/11, they shut down all air traffic for like 2 weeks. And I worked at a place that was I worked at Aerospace Corporation, which was right next to Dulles Airport. And we were so used to this continual drone of jet airliners taking off and landing that suddenly the silence was so eerie. It was very nerve-wracking just to not hear those jet airliners. So, yeah. So you and I are sitting in the Pentagon as staffers, and we've given them a plan of action, and they've rejected that. And
you could do like a localized shutdown, right?
Over Jersey,
shut down
over Newark. Shut down Newark over the holidays. Oh, I mean, the people in Jersey, they'll be hopping mad at you. I mean, next you'll tell them we got to shut down the casinos on the Jersey Shore, and that.
Yeah, Paulie doesn't like that. Paulie
don't like that.
And Paulie Two Tums might show up at your house, you know?
That's right. He might show up at your house. That's right. I got my brother lives in New York City, and I said, what do you hear out of Jersey? And he says, I don't hear nothing. It's very strange, he says. Because he loves rumors, And he told me his version of events when they were trying to convert during World War II. They were trying to convert this very fast cruise liner, the Normandy, into a troop ship. So they got it at the docks down in New York Harbor, and they're tearing out all the fancy stuff, and they're putting in bunks for all these troops. And they got it about half converted into a troop ship, and then suddenly a fire breaks out on board and burns up the ship. And it sinks right there by the dock. It's a big mess. And so the Navy that was in charge of this asked the police if they had any clues to who might have lighted the fire or if it was sabotage or something. And the New York police told them, the Luciano family organization, they run the docks. You got to go talk to them. So the Navy went to this crime family, the mafia, and asked them. And after these conversations, the admirals got together and decided they might need a little protection down on the docks. And so, they found Lucky Luciano sitting in prison at Sing Sing, and they said, okay, you make sure there's no trouble down on the docks, no strikes, no sabotage, and we'll get you out. We'll get you a get out of jail free card when the war's over. So they did. They sent him back to Sicily, which he hated. He hated going back to Sicily. He grew up there. The United States is a much nicer place. It's a lot more money there. So anyway, so that's so the government decided they need some protection down on the docks, so they went to the Gambino family or whatever the family was running the docks. So this is being, you can't shut down Newark because and you can't any more than you can shut down the Casino Row down in where are all the casinos in Jersey? Jersey City? I don't know.
Atlantic City.
Atlantic City. You can't shut down Atlantic City. You might as well be. The general would say to us, "You might as well be telling them to shut down Atlantic City." No, we can't do that. It's the holidays. So Plan B is you hire a bunch of patsies to go fly drones and then arrest them.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen.
That's it
already happened in Logan Airport. They found 2 people.
That's right. They already hired some. They'll probably say they were hired by somebody to do this, and they can't find the person who hired them, but they're
some crime family, some criminal syndicate.
Some crime family. Yeah, I don't know who runs Boston. The crime family that runs Boston, but So
it might be the Irish, might be the Italian,
might be the Irish. It could be the old
used to be Whitey Bulger, but now
Whitey Bulger, and he had to retire. He got retired in prison. His pension ran out in prison, they say. So so there's Plan A is shut down all the airspace, and if it flies, it dies. Okay, I think that would solve the problem, but we can't do that right now. Maybe January 2nd.
Mm-hmm. But they won't, because Mayorkas is going to want to be trusting the experts.
Plan B is we got to put up with all of this BS through the holidays. And, like I said, we just have to defy the secret government, the ETs, everybody else, the incompetent public government, defy them by just having a lot of Christmas cheer and in God we trust. We'll celebrate Christmas and Hanukkah and New Year's, and just mentally check out. Once your ability to logically analyze something comes up with nothing, you're really forced to kind of just be illogical. And that's my response. Just be grateful for what we have, and don't make any more crises in Ukraine. Don't launch any more bleeping TACMs.
They will, because these people are.
Why? Okay, let me ask you this: why are they doing that?
Because they're playing tit for tat. Like somebody taught them about game theory, and the best negotiating strategy is tit for tat. So what's going to happen is the next move is, as we discussed this at the beginning, right? Putin's going to launch another Oreshnik strike, this time at a more high value target location, right? So
Kiev,
that's going to piss us off, right? So then we're going to send another ATACMS strike, and then if they start doing like nuclear tests underground again, right? Who knows if the stuff that we have works?
Well, actually, right? I'm hoping that's the most severe response they do is start doing nuclear tests underground.
But that'll be a sign. Like it's not going to be all of a sudden there's nuclear weapons falling in American cities. Well, like that will be an escalatory step.
The incoming president, for those who don't like to hear the sound of his name, the incoming president has basically put everyone on notice that he wants this Iranian war. I mean, I'm not the Iranian, the Ukraine war to end. He just wants it to end. They've killed enough people. We've gotten so close to a nuclear war with this situation. It has to end. It's my understanding, by the way, that the Ukrainian military is on the verge of collapse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Russians are continuing to advance. We're not hearing it in the Western media because the Western media is just a propaganda organ of the elites.
Well, they have the French, the Germans, and even the British are delusional. If they think they're gonna somehow win this war against the Russian has 4 times the population.
3 of Ukraine. But close enough.
And they've hired a bunch
Although, you know what? It might now be 4 times because of all the people who fled Ukraine and all the people who died. So maybe it is 4 times. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I just looked at the numbers on Wikipedia. Stupid me, but so I mean, they have a lot more young men to expend, and the Russians are apparently fighting a smarter war than they were. So, okay, here's what you have to prepare for. The military situation in Ukraine could collapse for the Ukrainians. And that means we're going to get several million refugees from Ukraine. I would start thinking about what are we going to do when that happens? Mm-hmm. Are we going to abandon them? They were just pawns in a great geopolitical, a geopolitical chess game we were waging, and it's failed. So we're going to have an enormous number of Ukrainian refugees.
We have some pretty strong reactions to that.
Well,
Mayorkas already let in 8 million of them, many of whom were criminals. Well, actually, they're all criminals because their first fundamental act on American soil was to break the law by coming here.
I know.
Yeah, we have 8 million criminals that came here already. So,
look, I'm sorry. Let's not talk about such unpleasant things. We'll deal with that in the new year.
Mm-hmm.
But that's coming, I'm afraid, you guys. And you guys are going to have to figure out what to do about it.
So are the Syrians, too. Because when ISIS takes over and they start chopping off people's heads, you're going to have a renewed migrant crisis out of Syria.
There's a large Christian population. This seals the death sentence for just about every Christian in, not to mention the Druze.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's these weird...
The Shiites,
well, at least they can go to Lebanon,
Mm-hmm.
The Druze and the Christians, they can't go to Lebanon. I don't know what's going to happen. It's one of the problems with even an incompetent government still managing to have a pretty pleasant place to live here in this country is that all of these other places that are collapsing or going to collapse view us as their last sanctuary. Of course, they could go north to Canada. There, Canadians. Ask Pierre Trudeau what he will do.
Justin Castro. Trudeau.
Yeah. Yes. Mr. Castro Trudeau.
Mm-hmm.
So, for a long time, people pointed at Canada as an example of what this country could have been if things were run in a more orderly and tidy manner. And not anymore. No, with Trudeau in charge. So there's plenty of incompetence to go around in the Western democracies. By the way, I not to mention my novel again. One of the nice things about my novel, the forces of good in my novel are barely competent. But the forces of evil are grossly incompetent. They finally decide to kill the main heroine, the Asian American, and instead they blow up the parking attendant who has long black hair like hers, and so I have this scene later in the hospital. She after she does her broadcast showing that she's still alive, she then faints, and they discover that there's little pieces of shrapnel in her back, and she's actually bleeding under her bomber jacket. So they take her to the hospital, and they're picking little pieces of shrapnel out of her, including one larger piece out of one of the cheeks of her buttocks. And so she's lying there with no clothes on on a table while the emergency guy picks all these pieces of metal out of her. And it's very minor. And her friend, the blonde, is sitting there watching all of this and flirting with the doctor, of course. And finally, Cassandra Chen says to the blonde, she says, "How do things look back there?" She said, "We're talking my major asset back there." And the blonde says, "Great muscle tone on that Tushy." So they managed to escape that assassination attempt. And so anyway, the book has a happy ending, sort of. And but anyway, so you'll see me on X mentioning this Morningstar scenario. And one of the reasons I'm doing it is I'm dropping depth charges. That if anybody in the basement of the White House, basement office of the White House, where 4 people meet to run the country, thinks that they can get away with some crazy scheme to prevent inauguration, all they'll have to do is look on X and see that this is already being discussed. You can't do it. You can't do what's that?
You also have 20 million veterans that just wouldn't let that happen.
Oh, yeah. If they try to do that, it will be crushed by loyalist forces loyal to Congress. And not only that, 20 million veterans will converge on Washington, D.C. and make the secret government put back everything the way it was. And then we will have an inauguration like we should have there. That's how this will end. You're going to see one picture I'm going to post and this happened in the novel, by the way. By 24 hours, the coup is being crushed. Well, actually, in the coup, the aliens had promised them to show up in the sky over Washington, D.C. to produce shock and awe to back up the coup, but it's cloudy. No one can see the aliens, and the aliens are afraid to come below the cloud deck because they know people will shoot at them, and their ships are made out of tinfoil. So the coup is crushed. And finally, by the morning, a naval squadron shows up with a whole bunch of Marines on the Potomac, and they have Navy fighters napalming parts of the mall where the troops in black are concentrated. And the troops in black are finally, there's one scene in the White House Rose Garden with all these troops in black. They're all shot to pieces. They're wounded. And the head of the UFO cover-up is escaping in a helicopter. He's getting ready to board a helicopter to escape. And people see him getting in this helicopter. And this one medic says, we're running out of supplies here. And we didn't plan well for this operation. And the head of the UFO cover-up points at the morning star, which is the planet Venus, which is rising above the horizon, and says, "Look, an alien mothership is coming to help us with reinforcements and medical supplies and ammunition. Just hold on a little bit longer." And he gets everybody who can stand in the Rose Garden looking at this longingly at the planet Venus rising in the horizon that they now think is an alien mothership come to help them. And then he gets on his helicopter and flies out of there. dodging tracer bullets as they fly over the Potomac, where the National Guard and forces from the loyalist forces in the Pentagon are now mounting a big counterattack. So I put that in there just because it was so ironic, So anyway, yeah, in the novel, the UFO cover-up, the attempted UFO government cover-up coup d'etat is absolutely crushed, and so it's a lot of them are on drugs, so they won't surrender. They have to be killed, and so anyway, so that's as close to a happy ending as I can. Hey, it's a science fiction novel. Somebody criticized. What's that?
How do you think this thing escalates from now until the end of the year? Right? I mean, they're already flying over DC.
I think they're going to see more and more sightings over DC, and they will have to do the inauguration remotely because because they can't guarantee the president or the new government's safety, but it'll still be the inauguration will still occur. It'll just occur virtually, and then we'll have a new government in place, and I believe they will handle this much better than the present government. I'm confident that they will handle it better than this present government.
Well, I think since the current regime is going to keep escalating with Russia, I would expect to see reports of occupants before the end of the year, and I'm calling it right now.
Reports of occupants, meaning pilots, ET pilots, in crashes.
Well, I don't know what they are. All right, I'm not taking.
Sean, yeah. I don't give a bleep who they are. They're violating our airspace. I think my own belief, we should shut down the airspace. If it flies, it dies until the inauguration. And everybody can just enjoy their pumpkin pie at home rather than trying to fly around for the holidays. I'm sorry, it's a small price to pay for things being secure and safe. There.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think before they even do that,
what's that?
I think they need to tell the American people why they would be shutting down the airspace. That would be at first.
Well, they just say there's foreign.
Oh no, that's a disaster.
Flying in our airspace, and we're going to shut down our airspace. So the only thing that's flying is the foreign aircraft, and if it flies, it dies, just like we did after 9/11. Declare a 9/11 like air emergency, and have the Air Force, if it can manage to launch any fighters from Wright-Patterson.
Well, I mean,
they should.
The F-35 is a hangar queen, right? It's a hangar queen, so you gotta put some parts here, put some more parts here, and we probably buy all the parts from China, which will probably, since we're saying that we're shooting.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just here we are. We still have this big trading deficit with China, and at the same time, they're shipping all this fentanyl here. Any chip you buy from China has a back door in it, so the Chinese intelligence can monitor everything you're.
Yeah, all our cranes on the West Coast are like little Chinese chips in them.
I know. This is almost hilarious. The only thing that's heartening, though, is the fact that the very mercantile tendency of Chinese society, without Confucian ethics that used to help run it, is that, like the aircraft carriers put out all this black smoke because the high quality oil they were supposed to burn in their boilers has been sold in the black market in Shanghai. And they have just the cheapest oil they could find, put that on board the aircraft carriers, talk about hangar queen. These are harbor queens. These, I mean, their idea of picking on somebody is to pick on the Philippines.
Mhm.
So they
In
showed
Vietnam and
Vietnam. Yeah, they're picking on the small fry. And the last time the Chinese military actually attempted to do something important, they invaded North Vietnam after
Yeah,
the
it's like 2
after the
weeks.
Vietnamese invaded. And, the
2
2 weeks
They
war.
declared victory as their rear ends were on fire, racing out of it. Right.
Oh my God! That it was just, I'm a military history buff, so but I started reading these accounts of what the war was like in North Vietnam between the Chinese and the Vietnamese, two absolutely traditional enemies, bitter enemies, and it was one fiasco by the Chinese. It wasn't even interesting reading because it was one absolute fiasco by the Chinese military after another. The Vietnamese had a veteran army that was used to fighting us,
Mm-hmm.
and they had good jet fighters, and they had good Russian artillery that outranged anything the Chinese had at the time. So the Chinese basically got their ass chewed off for 2 weeks. They advanced 20 miles into North Vietnam and then declared victory and went back home. I'm not saying they should be, we got to be careful not to underestimate them, but at the same time, they're not 10 feet tall. They're maybe 10 feet wide, but they're not 10 feet tall. And, but we have to have
our government hasn't even admitted that whatever these things are, they exist yet. So they're not doing a good job of it. That's the problem with shutting down the airspace. You can't really say it's a pure competitor, because then they're going to wonder, why did you have your head up your ass for a month and a half before you decided to do this?
Oh,
that's not going to fly.
Why was the first base that got shut down Langley, which protects as part of the air network, supposedly Air Force networks protecting the nation's capital?
That's right.
You know what the story I heard is this: rather than sending a bunch of special forces people down there with special anti-drone gear, they sent a bunch of lawyers.
Yeah, jurisdictional. Yeah.
A team of lawyers was sent to Langley. Here our airspace is being violated over one of our strategic air bases. They send a bunch of lawyers. Rather than bringing down the drones with high-powered microwave beams, which I know they can do, or just bullets, or
again, John, they're not drones. That's just semantics. They're UAVs.
That's right. They're not drones. Right. They're something else, and they're not prepared to go there. But I'd say we have to go there, just like in 1952. We're a lot stronger and more capable than we were in 1952. They're basically the same stuff. So once again, God rest ye merry, ladies and gentlemen.
Any final words for the audience?
What's that?
Any final words for the audience?
Yeah, don't think any scenario is crazy enough to happen, to be hatched in the basement of the White House at this point. And I would call your senators and congressmen or congresspeople and complain bitterly that they're spoiling the holidays by this display of incompetence, that if they have to shut down the nation's airspace to do it, solve this problem. And I don't care who's flying this stuff. Shut it down. If it flies, it dies. And everybody enjoy their pumpkin pie at home. And at the same time, I want this thing in Ukraine quiet. I don't want to worry about a nuclear war for my 3 children and my 2 grandchildren. I don't. I think things should be nice and calm for the holidays. Is that too much to ask? I mean, what does your audience think? Wouldn't it be nice to just have a nice, calm holidays internationally?
Internationally, yes, but this whole drone flap, we're loving it. We're absolutely because it is just these people have been lying to me my entire life. Since I was born, since the day I was born, nothing but lies, and now they're paying for it, and it is absolutely wonderful to watch. Just the incompetence, the embarrassment, like
pants on fire.
This is well deserved. This is a well deserved thrashing. It is wonderful.
They had Admiral Kirby at the White House saying, all of this can be explained and, there's nothing to worry about. We don't know what's going on, but don't worry about it, and, you can just see his pants ignited. And who's the sweet looking lady who's supposed to be the White House spokesman for civilian stuff? She's sitting there rolling her eyes and thinking to herself, for once, I'm glad this idiot is here. So I don't have to answer these.
Are you talking about Admiral Kirby?
Yeah, I'm talking about Admiral Kirby, who bumped, Joan Pierre, or whatever her name is, Jean Pierre, off the podium. And she's resented it bitterly, apparently. But you could just see from her face that she says, for once, I'm glad he's here. So he can take the heat for this idiot. Idiot.
Yeah, Admiral Clown Car Kirby. Like first, it's
instead of me having to lie brazenly to the American public. So I say, God rest ye merry, ladies and gentlemen. Let nothing you dismay. Enjoy the holidays as an act of defiance.
Yeah, all right, everyone.
Of the secret
have a happy holidays.
The UFO
Merry Christmas.
People.
Happy
Hanukkah.
Have
wonderful holidays.
And whatever
Hanukkah.
else you're offering to the serpent god Gore. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. Who knows? Maybe
Merry Christmas, and we can all agree on a Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
All right. So thank you, everyone.
Them's my final words. And beware the Morning Star scenario. Anyway. You have a wonderful holidays, Sean. And if I don't talk to you before the new year, have a wonderful holidays yourself with you and your family.
You too, brother. Keep your head down and stay frosty.
Stay frosty. Live long and prosper, all of you. And may God bless you and all keep you.